Coach, thank you so very much for being on the Warm Down Pool. I'm very excited to talk with you. I had the privilege of listening to you last year at the CSEA convention. Talked to you just briefly after you got done talking to everybody about your journey at Howard. This is an amazing opportunity because I think you bring a very unique perspective to our sport, being the head coach of the only Division I HBCU program in the NCAA. I'm hoping that changes. We'll talk a little bit more about that because I'm hearing some whispers about possibly a school adding. So I'd love to talk with you more on that towards the end, but welcome to the show.
Eric, I'm thrilled to be here, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And the first thing I got to point out and I'm looking at the background on your screen, and I was going to talk about it, the energy and the passion that you guys have at your home meets. And I love the fact you've got seating on 3 sides, and that is a packed house. You don't see that in swimming. It does not happen. And the big change came about when you took over the program 9 years ago. We're going to talk about your dual meet environment. Obviously, the meets with Georgetown have been fantastic. But when you got the job, what were your initial goals for the program becoming the head coach?
Wow. It was a long list, to be perfectly honest with you. But we knew we needed to be strategic about it. We needed to go brick by brick, one step at a time. The most important things in that moment when I took over the program in 2014 was to reestablish a culture that the program had always had and still had in existence. But it's kind of like, I grew up in North Carolina, and, our main source of heat was a fireplace, right? So you put every logs in the fire, you get the fire going, and over time it starts to dwindle down. So we were really at just the embers. When I took over in 2014, 2015, and the goal was to start adding more fuel to the fire, add more logs to the fire to get it to burning as bright and as warm as we possibly could. So the first thing we took a note of was we had to take care of the athletes that we had in the program. We needed to make sure that we were developing a plan for them to get faster and to dive better, and to make sure that the environment was conducive to that. So we have this big thing, we talk about all the time is, what is our environment like when we're training, and what is our environment like when we're competing? And we're always taking note of that, trying to fine tune it and make sure that it is the best environment we can create for the swimmers and divers, athletes that we have in the current status, because it evolves. So in that time and space, we needed to make sure that we were giving them great training programs. We needed to be very well organized. One of the things, unfortunately, before I came on board, there had never been a head coach that was full-time. All the coaches in Howard University Swim and Dive history were part-time coaches. So that means they had to work full-time somewhere else, especially living in DC. DC is expensive. They had to have full-time jobs somewhere else, and this was their part-time gig. This was what they did. We kind of mentioned earlier, this was their side hustle. And they were great coaches. But to be able to commit to moving a program forward at a Division I level, you need somebody there full-time. You need somebody in the office, on the pool deck, really, catering to the needs of the student athletes. And so we paid a lot of attention to that. And we started with the programs and working with each athlete and that group and helping them get faster. And then we wanted to change the environment, the aesthetics of the environment. So I'm a Howard alum. So I swam in this pool, all my years. Even after graduation, I worked here for a couple years as the aquatics director. And, as much as we loved it and it was home, it was still, it needed some work. It needed some TLC. And so we got busy. We painted the entire, surroundings. One year, we started with the walls and hallways and in the restrooms and locker rooms. The next year, we painted the bleachers because there were like 4 different shades of blue in the auditorium. And none of them were Howard colors. They were like light blue and an aqua blue. It was really crazy. And the walls were gray. Just this drab gray. And we've got excellent sunlight that comes in through the windows and through the skylights, but it didn't do anything. It didn't make it pop. So we changed that because we wanted our swimmers and divers to come in and feel like, I like it here. This feels great. Not, oh my gosh, I don't feel so good. I feel sad. That's the worst thing you want to do for an athlete, is to have them come into a training environment immediately feel sad because they're there. So we paid a lot of attention to that. We changed that. We also were very fortunate that the university was undergoing rebranding. So we had gotten a new logo for the university, and we put that up, and we created this pride around it. And yeah, those were some of the big things that we did. And the other thing was making sure our coaching staff was super dynamic. All of our members of our coaching staff are HBCU graduates. So we have 5 that are part of that, myself, Howard grad, 3 others that are also Howard grads, and then Southern University, our wellness coach, Coach Jasmine Payne, she played softball for Southern, but she's an official, Howard Bison now. She's been with the program, I think, close to 6+ years. So, she's just as much of a Bison as anybody else at this point. And that was great, because what that did is it created a dynamic where we're all on the same page. We're all talking the same language. We just have different ways of doing it. So to give you a couple examples, speaking of Coach Jazz, our wellness coach, she does yoga for us every single week. She's the type of coach where, she's going to light some sage and, try to get the good spirits in the environment and, close your eyes, visualize, namaste, kind of, coach. Then you have Coach Miriam Lynch, or Dr. Lynch. She's our motherly kind of coach. She's like, oh, baby, come on. We got this. You're going to do this, and if somebody misses, say, hey, you're supposed to go, real nurturing. Then we've got Coach Salim. He's our comedian of the crew. He's always got smiles, or making people smile and telling jokes. Myself, because I'm the head coach, I have to be the tougher one. So everyone's like, hey, you don't want Coach Nic to come over here and have to tell you to get off the wall. And then you got Coach Courtney. He's an ordained pastor. So his thing is, look, I'm going to pray for you. You don't get up that wall, I'm going to pray for you because Coach Nic is coming. So we've got an incredible dynamic, and we're all speaking the same language. And because of that, when you have a group of swimmers, there's no way that you can have one coach that every swimmer or every athlete is going to feel the most comfortable going to. But when you have a dynamic in your coaching staff, in your leadership group, you're going to find someone that you gravitate towards. But again, you have to be speaking the same language. You have to be on page with the vision and the direction and the goals and the plans. And that was important to us early to establish that, to get that right. And, we've been together for, the last 7 years, and it's been working pretty good for us.
I know, following Howard University swimming, did a lot of research on it. I remember you guys were competing in the CCSA. Now you've moved to the Northeast Conference. Came on board 2014, 2015 was your first season, won your first dual meet. And I read an article somewhere where somebody asked you what the team scores were. And if I remember the situation, you looked at it, you're like, we won. And it was almost like it was a question as opposed to, but people didn't realize that was the first time you guys had won a dual meet in like 15 years. It was something really crazy like that.
Yeah.
When you take steps like that to build your program, you're bringing the pieces in, you're starting to see the success. Is the administration at that point starting to take a notice and saying, okay, we got something here. We're going to put the resources behind it. I'm sure it's still always a fight. I know it is with every school. I don't care if you're Texas or you're Howard University or West Virginia, wherever, you're still fighting the university for the resources. But was it at that point where the administration looked at the swim team and went, I think we got something here?
Yeah, I think so, Eric. I think what they saw is we were making progress. For us, we needed to show that we were making progress. And it wasn't just for our winning competitions, dual meets, and things like that. It was more so we needed to change the program. We were headed in the wrong direction. Unfortunately, our athletes weren't performing as well as they could academically. And we needed to change that, because that's not Howard. That's not, we are a very high academic institution. We know in Olympic sports, swimming can't have the lowest GPA in the athletic department. That cannot happen. So we knew we needed to change that, and that needed to be one of the first things that we paid attention to. So being able to do that first, approach the academic side, then we really started establishing a community service plan, working with different groups in the community and doing more for on-campus community. Those were really, really important. And the university started taking big note of that. And all the while we were doing the work in the pool. And that's what allowed us to be able to get to where we are now. But that moment where we were in our plan, we weren't thinking that we were ready to win a dual meet yet, honestly. And I say that because we made a decision that we defined success, that we weren't going to let anyone else tell us, oh, you're successful or unsuccessful. We said, listen, here are the things each year that we want to be able to do. And if we can do those things, then man, we won. Our record might not show that we won, but we're winning. And we were a little ahead of the game. So at that very meet, we're going through the results and things like that. And somebody, it's like, coach, what was the score? Who won? In my mind, I was like, man, we already know who won. Why we got to talk about that right now? But I looked, I flipped the page and it said that we had won, and there was this eruption, and it felt amazing. And from there, year after year, continuing to get better, the athletic department, the university has continued to provide more and more resources and support behind the program. And no, we don't have everything we want, and we do still have quite a few needs, but we're step by step, brick by brick. The university has not been at a stage where they've been like, no. They've probably said not yet, or we'll have to see how we might be able to work something like that or something similar. So we're grateful for the amount of support the department has given us. And, the university, our president, Dr. Frederick, he was the one who was in presidency that had the vision when they brought me on board. The athletic director was a different athletic director at the time, but our new athletic director has an incredible vision. Carrie Davis came in and has really continued to provide the support in each and every year. So we're thankful.
I know, reading about the support early on in your career, if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure I read this somewhere, you turned the job down once and then came back a year later. And amongst the alumni, because the program had gone kind of down the wrong path, you were actually one of the alums advocating for the program to be shuttered, if I read that correctly, because you felt like if they weren't going to put the resources in, you weren't going to get the support necessary, that it wasn't, you were doing a disservice to the student athletes. 9 years later as the head coach, I'm sure you're looking back at yourself and going, so what happened was, oops. But I'm grateful because I know it was, I think your second year, 2016, it was announced that Florida A&M was dropping swimming, and that left you guys kind of holding the bag as the only HBCU offering swimming at the Division I level. When you got that notification that Florida A&M was dropping, did you feel like, okay, we're the flagship, we're it, we've got to maintain the standard? And what were some of the steps that you took after that to ensure that Howard University was not going to be the last one and that you guys were going to have it dropped on you?
Yeah. So it was actually North Carolina A&T. State University in Greensboro. But
okay.
No, in Florida A&M had shut down their program, I think somewhere around 2008, 2009. So it wasn't that, that far back either. North Carolina A&T had an all women's program. They'd been doing pretty well. They've been holding fast. And I remember our last dual meet. And I remember that environment. But what I remember the most was the joy we had while competing and the sorrow and sadness at the very end on those young ladies' faces. I'll never forget how the tears of knowing that this is the last moment for them and for that program. And it was gut-wrenching. It was so hard to watch and be a part of, because the meet was phenomenal. There was such great competition, as any rival school, you're going head to head. So you've got the people in the stands, and an HBCU rivalry is a little bit different, but it's special. And to have had that great of a meet, and then at the very end, knowing that was it for them. And then the same thing at conference, because we were in the same conference in the CCSA. To see them have that's such a good time during those 3 or 4 days for conference, and then the sorrow at the very end, speaking with the coaches, it was hard. It was really, really, really hard. And for me and my coaching staff, we knew that, hey, we would always be in danger, but this kind of brought it home that much more, because now we were the only one left. We felt good about the support the university was giving us. We felt good about where the department was continuing to support us. But we knew that if there was a misstep, then it would be put on the table. And we knew if we did not continue to stay on the path that we were on and continue to do well, it could very likely be us. And we're still in that space. No, I don't think any program, any swimming and diving program is really safe.
Not at all.
Sport, facility wise, when you're looking at a university that's always budget conscious, especially at, institutions who don't have a very large endowment or aren't really generating revenue through, their programs. They're just kind of holding steady each and every year. You have to be aware of that. And we certainly were, and we certainly are, to the point where we needed to just really make sure our student athletes knew that and knew that they weren't under any type of pressure to win medals, win conference and things like that. But we needed to make sure that we were the type of program that was being progressive, that was taking care of the academics, serving the community, training as hard as they possibly could, and putting ourselves in situations where we could win. Because we're not measured by the university and the department by our win-loss records or how many championships we've won. It's all about, are we providing the type of program and environment that is uplifting, is positive, and is working hard. We don't just show up and say, okay, we're good. We do work hard. We work for everything we get. So I think in 2016, I think that's when it was. Yeah, it did put a little bit more weight on the shoulders. But I tell you, like I tell everybody else, we're built for it. We're in the space where we're ready to take on that type of weight and that type of pressure, and we lean into it because we know that if not us, then who?
Exactly. And I know a lot of HBCU programs that have aquatic centers on campus that they still operate as part of recreation sports. You mentioned Florida or North Carolina A&T, Florida A&M, Central State in Ohio.
Yeah.
I think Kentucky State here in the Bluegrass State has one as well. And that was one where about 5-6 years ago, I had been contacted by their athletic director at the time because they were talking about they need to grow enrollment. Athletics is obviously an enrollment driver. They're Division II. They've got access to a facility. And then they had financial issues where the state actually had to take it over. So there was some progress with some schools that I had heard. And I know one of the names that's been throwing around, I don't know that it is a traditional HBCU, but Chicago State, which is a predominantly African-American university, they've got an 8-lane, 25-yard pool with a separate diving well. I'm like, why do you not have a team?
Yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think there has been some discussions of adding swimming there. I know it came up in conversation with the CSCAA and what we can do to help foster that. But one of the things you brought up is that kind of paying it forward a little bit and trying to get back to the program, give back to the community. How has the alumni support been? Obviously, you're a proud alumnus, and I'm sure that there are a lot of your former teammates who are like, thank you for saving this and keeping us above water. But how has your alumni relationship been, especially since winning a conference championship this year in the Northeast Conference?
No, it's been great from the very start. You had mentioned in the previous question about how I was one of the loudest and most outspoken about shutting the program down. I've been known to speak. When I was an undergrad, I was known to speak. Afterwards, known to speak. And now as a coach, I'm known to speak my mind. But I felt very strongly that the university and the department was doing a disservice to the swimmers and divers a part of the program. There were people coming in who were really good swimmers, had a great history in age group swimming, that got here and weren't developing because they didn't have an environment that allowed them to develop. And because of that, that's why I was like, we need to stop lying. Let's just stop lying and shut it down. I'd rather people choose a different school that maybe was not their first choice, but at least they get to the goals or get a chance to fulfill the goals versus coming here and have false hopes, essentially what it boiled down to. And when I did take the position, when they offered it the second time, a lot of the alum were like, didn't we just have a call a year ago? And you were like, man, we need to write letters. They just need to shut it down. And now you're talking about, can you donate $500?
I'm sure there was a little bit of crow you had to eat on that one.
Yeah. And it's okay. It's okay. My thing was like, look, they gave us a chance. They gave us an opportunity. And what I told them was, listen, they hired a full-time coach, and it just so happened that they put the trust in me. And now we need to really build a machine, get behind it, because now we have a chance. And if we don't get this right, then they are going to shut it down. So let's get it right. And my commitment of getting it right was taking on the position and rolling up the sleeves and doing the work. The alumni then, and it was cool because I have a, showing my age, I have a Rolodex. I have a contact list of alumni that goes all the way back to the mid 80s because I had two older brothers who attended Howard. My middle brother, Mark, was actually the captain of the team during his junior and senior year. So I would come up and watch their practices and meets when I was, in middle school, high school, and then when I got here in 96. So I had a good amount of relationships that went back into those mid 80s. So it was easy for me to pick up the phone and do a cold call and say, hey, we need your support. Can you do X, Y, and Z, whether it was financial, whether it was coming to the meet, whether it was recruiting, all those different types of things, and just building that information and think tank for some of the ways we can get better. So the alumni really, really backed us early on, and it's just continued to get even better now because we have so much exposure that some of the alumni that had disconnected because they did not have a good experience have now reconnected, and they've sent letters and emails. And yeah, I said letters. They've actually been things that have shown up in the and emails and text messages and over social media talking about, wow, they're so happy that the program is doing so well and they want to support. What's the donation link and things like that. So we've been paying a lot of attention, and we're so thankful that because of that, people are seeing the work that we've done and are willing to give back, even at a point where when they may have been here, it wasn't the best experience for them. Because my coaching staff, again, talking about 4 of the 5 of us, we knew we didn't have the best, but we continued to see it all the way through. And one of our pledges was to be able to now in this space where we stand on deck, to be able to give the team all the things that we wanted and needed, and then even more. So to the point where some of our team, they get gear and they get all this stuff. So I'm like, man, we had one sweatsuit that we had to wear for all 4 years. And it wasn't Nike, by the way. We had one pair of goggles, and, we talk about all those stories so they can, I know they don't pay us any attention. They don't listen to us whatsoever. But to know that, man, we've come so far and that they should be grateful for all the things that they're receiving and they're getting. And I know they will be, even if they aren't in the very moment, they will be once they graduate and move on, because it'll make sense to them even more later on.
I know where I went to school was Ashland University in Ohio, division school program, about an hour north of Columbus. We would always talk about what the class behind us got. The biggest one is like, we had been promised in my class, that 50-meter pool is coming, or the brand new aquatic center is coming. And sure enough, it did. 10 years after I was gone, there was a brand new aquatic center. And the alumni that I have right now, one year we had enough fundraising. I got the team shoes. Like, swimmers don't need running shoes, but we got them shoes because we thought it'd look nice. The alumni came back for a meet and they were like, of course, after I leave and they get the shoes, my response is like, I don't know what you guys are complaining about. They're going to dig the 50-meter hole the day after I leave. So I don't want to hear any complaints from you guys. To hear that the alumni are behind the program, because as you've seen, there's a lot of programs out there that when they get shuttered, they don't get that opportunity to come back despite alumni support. I know Michigan State is still fighting right now. Yeah. Hopefully at least their women will be restored. And then University of Iowa, same thing. So we're seeing swimming at all levels being affected by inflation, university costs going up. And if you can have that strong alumni base that is passionate and can be behind the program, even if you don't have the most supportive administrative group in your department, which it sounds like you guys actually do, they're going to listen to those alumni. They're going to say, okay, we're going to give this a chance. And they clearly did that with you in taking over the program. Again, the energy that I have seen at that meet, again, this is an audio podcast, so they're not going to see it, but the background of your pool, having spectators on 3 sides. I've heard you've had the dance team there. I know you got the DJ, and I'm not going to lie, my swimmers have heard about this and they're like, Coach, can we get a DJ? And I'm like, they have more pool deck space than we do and spectator, but there are some things that I think a lot of programs, whether it's Division I, Power 5, or a small NAIA school or D3 out on the West Coast, they can take notice of, and they can take from what you guys have done to accent their program, to make dual meets are sometimes the most boring things on the planet, especially when you kick a meet off with, I know. You kick a meet off with a great medley relay that comes down to the end, and then we throw the 1,000 at them. It's like,
right behind it. Yeah.
My athletic director literally will stand up at the window, which is connected to our basketball arena. And if there's a game going on, he'll come down to the meet, but he'll do it after the 1,000 is over. And I actually had to text him one time. We combined the men's and women's 1,000. They're going to be done in 5 minutes. I'm texting him during the meet so he'd come down, and he goes, "That's just a brutal event." And I said, "Yeah, thanks for the event. I swam for all of my life." And I also had to remind him, "You coach golf. That was your sport. So I don't want to hear anything."
Right.
But you've built this program up over 9 years. You've had some phenomenal athletes. I think I read one of the young men that you have is using his COVID fifth year. University of Georgia, is that correct?
Yep.
Or
yeah.
So I don't want to say that the Power Five are poaching from you, because obviously they gave you 4 great years, but they did. But that's got to be a little feather in your cap that you know that, okay, we've got an athlete that Georgia wants. When you are recruiting these athletes, when you're recruiting these young men and women, what are some of the key things that you look for in the recruiting process?
Yeah, actually I want to go back a little bit and talk about the environment and facility and in our pool. We have 422 stadium seats in our natatorium, which is a good size for a mid-major school. And we have a very unique kind of horseshoe surrounding. And when we first took over, we'd have probably 50, 60 people in the stands, and they wouldn't stay the entire time because of, how do you go to a 3.5-hour meet? Especially you were invited, and let's be real. We're on a campus of an HBCU. So most of the people in the stands, if not all of them, are black and brown and don't know the difference between butterfly and the doggy paddle. They definitely don't know the difference in the distances, which event is which. So we had to make sure that we tried to feed into our spectators. So we first started with an on-deck DJ, because that music and was able to entertain the folks that we had in the stands, and they're like, "Man, yeah, I can sit for this a little while." And then when they thought they were going to leave, they'd hear another song that they liked, so they would stay a little bit longer. And it just so happened to be at the same time as we were competing. And I love hearing how, you're talking about your athletic director in that 1,000, because our team continued to get better and better. Some of the most exciting events are now our distance events, the 1,000 and the 500. And the tide changed our 4th season, and we had a really good crowd. We had about 300 people, and the 1,000 free right after the 2 medley relay. Both the men and the women came down to winning the event, came down to the final 50. And in each of those, a Howard swimmer hawked down our competitor. I don't remember which team it was at that time, but hawked them down from behind, about a body length and a half behind, and hawked them down in the last 50. But they stayed with him. And because the music was in the background, it was almost like watching a movie. If you can kind of think about that the suspense was building, and gosh, here it comes. And then at the very end, the Howard swimmer won in both the men's and the women's. So it was really, really cool, to see that. And we knew the tides were changing from that to the point now where we have standing room only. We have 600 people, 700 people at all of our dual meets. Battle at the Burr, which is the biggest home meet we've ever put together, had over 1,200 people. We sold out a natatorium in 2 weeks. Sold out. We sold tickets for a swim meet, and we had a VIP area. It was amazing, and we're actually bringing that back. But to move forward to your question, about the swimmers and people like Miles, who is going and spending his 5th year at University of Georgia, and his cohort of seniors, as well as everyone we have on the team, are special. And what we're looking for is, obviously, number one, you got to get accepted. So you have to have good grades. Number 2, you have to be a high performer in swimming or in diving. But number 3, we really, really pay attention to character. You cannot be selfish, even though swimming as a sport doesn't really lend into, a team environment and thinking about others and, having the mentality that you're part of something bigger than yourself, because swimming is about your time, that you do in your lane, in your event, and trying to turn that corner to get swimmers, especially, to understand this team environment that you can have at high school or in college. It's tough. It's tricky. It's tricky to navigate. So we're looking for people who are not selfish, people who have integrity. We need them to be able to work hard when no one's watching, Because when we have the whole team in the pool or we're separate groups, it's 25, 26, sometimes 40 people in our 6-lane pool. You're not going to get every split. We're not going to be able to get that for everybody. We're not going to see every lap. We're not going to see every turn. So you're not going to get that one-on-one attention or that individualized attention. So you've got to be able to know that you have your team, your coaches, and inside of you should expect nothing but giving your best. And we try to read that when we're in the recruiting process, because we know that that's going to foster the type of environment that's going to have a chance for success. Those dynamics are really, really important for us. And that's what we're looking for. And then we really appreciate high energy people. And it doesn't mean that you've got to be 100% rah-rah all the time, but it shouldn't be like pulling teeth to get you up to cheer. It shouldn't be difficult for you to express your joy and happiness for someone else doing well, or even yourself doing well. At the same time, carrying that humility. So those are big things that we look for in our recruits. We love for our recruits also to be competitive, and not just you have to win all the time, because I don't think that's what competitive means. Competitive to us means you're trying to get better at all times. And let's say you and I are in opposite lanes and you're faster than me. You're 100 free, 200 free is, 5-10 seconds faster than me. What we'd like to see is someone to be like, you know what? You might be faster than me, but I'm going to beat you off the walls. My underwaters are going to be better. I'm going to win that portion of this race or this training set. And what that will do is that'll make you like, wait a minute, I'm faster than him, but he's beating me here. Let me pick it up. So it's that iron sharpens iron mentality that we have in our environment, and we're looking for glimpses of those when we're in the recruiting process, because that's what's been able to lend to our success that we've had this far. And we have no doubt that's going to be part of the recipe of where we go next.
I love that phrase, iron sharpens iron. I think that it is critical in a sport. Swimming is an individual sport practiced by teams. And I've heard that for track and field, cross country, swimming. The biggest one that I stole that line from was from cycling, because you can only have one winner of the Tour de France, but you need 9 other guys to help you get there. And a guy like a Miles Simon, and who is going on to Georgia, having those successes, he didn't get there by himself. He got there because he had the support of his teammates. He had the people rallying behind him. And at the same time, he was there to rally behind his teammates. And the success of a very good culture or a great culture is dependent on that selflessness. And I've struggled with that at times with my own program here at Cumberland's, where we have individuals that they're tunnel vision on them and it's hard to get them into the fold. And I'm working on ways to incorporate that, but it sounds like for you guys at Howard, I don't want to see you figured out the formula, because I'm sure you still have those kids once in a while that you gotta get them on board, and it takes a little bit longer. But having those upperclassmen that can sit there and go, this is the Howard Bison way. This is how we do things here, and have those freshmen and newcomers come into your program and go, I'm a part of something special. And in your case, something very unique. Again, the only HBCU with varsity swimming at Division I level. And there's a great sense of pride that has to come from that. And I think that is incredible. And that's part of the reason why I was so inspired when I heard you speak last year at the CSEA convention in Rosemont, is that these kids are committed to the program. They're committed to the university. A university, by the way, who has some of the most amazing names in alumni history. Black Panther himself, Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace. Taraji P. Henson, Academy Award nominated actress. Current VP Kamala Harris. I could run the list. One of the greatest TV moms of all time, Felissa Rashad. I've done my research. I know where I'm at. But you have a lot of people who have great pride in Howard University, and not just there, but into the athletic programs and all of their sports. And it sounds like it's your athletes that are really driving a lot with the overall culture of your program.
Yeah, I'll give a quick story. I've talked about this one before, talking about Miles Simon. So Miles Simon was the second Howard University swimmer and diver to make the U.S. Olympic trials. And he made it in the 50 free. At conference this year, Miles didn't swim the 50 free. He swam the 200 IM. And if you dig into that, you see that the premier event for him, his event, the event where he's going to really do the best, and he's going to have the best results are in that sprint freestyle. 200 IM, 500 free, and the 50 free are all the first individual events at our conference championships. We are a very heavy sprint based team. So we knew that, our sprint group was going to place really well and score a lot of points. 200 IM group was not going to do as well. So we made a decision very early on that Miles would be the person who we would need to swim the 2 IM to give us a best chance of placing top 3. Now, he went on to win the 200 IM and break the university record and the conference record, which we were thrilled about. That was like icing on the cake, and everything. But he bought into that. He knew that he was ready to do whatever it took for the team. And that's just one instance. There are so many other. I'll give you another example. Brenton Cooper from Louisiana, in his freshman year, knew that his premier events were the 100 fly and the 200 fly. He didn't really have a third event where he would score, but he looked over and he said, Coach, I see the 1650 only has 23 guys. I can beat some of those. I can score some points in the 1650. And so this was like after midseason. So we've gotten a chance to look over all the other teams in our conference and what their times were after their mid-seasons. And he's like, I think I can beat at least 8 or 9 of those guys. I can get us a top 16 time. I was like, Brent, are you sure? You train sprint. He was like, no, coach, I got this. So we started training him distance, and lo and behold, he went to conference championship and swam the mile voluntarily, not being a distance swimmer. And that's as a freshman. So I think for sure that we've done a pretty good job of instilling, that bigger picture mentality. And I encourage all the other coaches and teachers and everyone to make sure that you express the vision. You talk about the goals, the big picture early on, because it can lead to that getting out of that selfish side. What's in it for me, or things like that. But make sure you also pay attention to what's important to that swimmer. And I say that to say, with Miles, the trade-off was, okay, Miles, you're going to swim the 2 IM, but we're going to make sure you swim the lead off in the 2 free relay. So you get that 50 free time. And guess what, buddy? If you're not happy with that time, we'll get you a time trial, or we'll look at a last chance meet or something like that. We laid all that out there. So they know that, hey, we're pouring into you as best we possibly can, because we're thankful that you're doing what it takes for the team. So that's those types of cultures, those type of environments are going to thrive in the corporate business room, in the emergency room with the doctors, all that. Everybody's looking out for each other for the big goal, for the big picture.
I think it's funny that you said that 200 IM was not going to be a strong event for you, and then you turn around and you put 4 up in the championship finals, which is what you had more than in the 50 free. So I like the humility there, Coach. But again, Miles goes around, he goes 146.8, 200 IM, then he turns around, leads off the 200 freestyle relay, goes 19.4, has an overall great meet, balance across the board with the guys. And again, it's that doing what's best for the team. I know last year in 2022, coming up a little bit short to Brian at the Northeast Championships, that left a sour, I guarantee you that left a sour taste in everybody's mouth. Oh, yeah. And coming into this year, the big competition was going to be with Long Island University, with St. Francis kind of hanging in the wings a little bit. And you guys were just like, not again, this isn't going to happen. So I guarantee you, when you had that conversation with Miles, and again, I wasn't in the room, we didn't talk about this ahead of time. When you had that conversation with him, he thought, okay, we need to win this. This is our year. This is our time, and I'm going to do what's necessary for the team. And that just shows incredible leadership from a senior. And I would bet 100%, I put all my money down that those freshmen and sophomores look to him and what he did. And again, sacrificing a conference championship in the 50 free. Sure, he made it up winning the 200 IM, but at the same time, the 50 is his baby, but he's doing what's best for the team. And that sends a clear message. I think the University of Georgia is going to be excited to have him be a part of their program, and as a 5th year come in and be that kind of leader right off the bat. And I'll definitely be watching that as well as watching you guys for this upcoming year. With your program, I think I read an article, you've got around 50 kids that you've got to balance. I have 60 in my 6-lane, 25-yard pool. How are you able to structure practices within your facility, and how does that typically work in scheduling with your student athletes?
Yeah, it's tough. 6-lane, 25-yard pool, and we don't have full uses of the pool at all times. So it's not like, oh, we can bring in a group of 10 here and a group of 15 here. We're really still within the same block as most other mid-majors, where morning we've got 5:30 till not 8:30 a.m. we can use however we want, and then from 3:30 till about 6:30 we can use however we want. So we've got 2 3-hour blocks. What we do is we do high quality and shorten the time spans. If we can, in our mornings, we separate the men and women's team. And what we do is we have one team doing dry land starting at 5:30 and one team doing in the water starting at 5:30. Both of those starting at 5:30 start with a really good warm up, whether it's in the pool or it's during dry land, and then a preset. And then we get right to the main set. And those mornings in the water are sprint and distance groups, where we split them into distance groups. So they sprint, mid-distance, and distance. And so we get right to the meat and potatoes of what we're doing, high intensity work there. In the dry land side, we're very specific about what we're trying to build or what we're trying to grow in that particular part of the season. And then when we are in the afternoons, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have 2 different groups that are doing that start at 2 different times. And the same thing for Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. The only difference is on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, they're in the afternoons. They go to weight room. Half the group is in weight room, and then half the group is and when they finish weight room, they're done. They go to the pool. So they go weight room, in the water, done. And then the second group goes in, weight room, and then water, and done. And they're staggered by about 90 minutes. On the Tuesday, Thursdays, that's when we have our stroke groups. That's where we have to be even more cautious, because swimming freestyle and backstroke versus swimming fly and breaststroke, you're in your lane, but you're also encroaching, either below the lane line or above the lane line as you're doing it. So what we do is we'll have half the team on the shallow side and half the team on the deep side for send-offs. And that way you have a little bit more space on the wall. We get really creative. We'll take part of the team out and they'll do bands or on the pool deck, different types of work, and then they'll get right back in the water. We do different circuits, in the lanes. We'll take 2 lanes for power towers, 2 lanes for starts, 2 lanes for turns. And it just depends on where we are in the year and what workout we're doing. So we try, and we think we've done a pretty good job. There's some things we're going to tweak this upcoming year and moving forward of maximizing the space that we have with the numbers that we have. So you do have to be creative, and part 10% of that creativity, you're going to be like, yeah, we're not doing that again. That was stupid. That did not work at all. And then, there's a good portion that you're going to keep. Like, okay, that was good. Might need to tweak it just a little bit, but that was good. And then you just hold on to those things that work really well for you. So, get in there, let your imagination run wild, figure out what you can do with your spaces. And usually the team, a lot of good things will come up for your team.
I think that's one thing that, and I've talked about this on several other podcasts with other coaches, is that the creativity that coaches have nowadays with facility space or with their athletes, we're still seeing some of the traditional types of training that are out there, but at the same time, people are willing to experiment with new ideas and new things. And I know I've written countless sets that it looks fantastic on paper, and then you execute it and you're just standing there watching the train wreck just keep going by and back and forth. And then there's other times where you write a workout and you're just, okay, this is never going to work. And then the kids come up to you and like, Coach, that was great. But what were you thinking? What was your thinking behind that? And then you just have to lie to them. There's no truth whatsoever. I mean, we were trying to work a lot of anaerobic today, and we were really focusing on, and then your assistant coach is like, Coach, you said you hated that. I go, yeah, well, they love it. We're keeping that one.
Keeping that one. Yeah.
I had a coach one time. I had a coach one time ask me what my methodology was, and I kind of explained it to him and broke it down for him, my microcycles, macrocycles, and he goes, I just throw things against the wall and see what sticks. And I went, this is why you are a Power 5 head coach. And this clearly explains everything.
Yeah.
One of the things I also wanted to shed light on to our listeners right now, in that we as coaches, we do a lot. We college coaches, we are not only are we on the pool deck, we are admissions counselors, we're financial aid, we're the gateway to counseling centers, we are babysitters at times, unfortunately. We are mediators when fights break out. I have actually been asked for relationship advice, which I went, I'm the wrong person for that. When we affectionately, we call it here at Cumberland's, we call it swimcest. When the swimmers start dating. It's not a term I'm proud of, but it's one that fits. But we've got, I know how many hours I put in a week, and you said, you know what? Hold my beer. I want to be the tennis coach too. What are you thinking? Like, how has your wife not strangled you yet? Because you said, you know what? I'm already the head coach of a program where I'm putting probably about 60 hours in. Let's add another 40 to 50 on top of that with tennis.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, again, you played tennis at Howard, and then they said, hey, you're not doing enough. Your administration says you're clearly not busy. Why don't you take our tennis programs?
Yeah, we're not maximizing our capacity here with you, Coach Askew. And my wife, definitely. We have a really good marriage counselor who helps us navigate, all of that. No, she's super supportive. I've got a great family, but there's no question, it's tough. It's really tough. I don't recommend it to anyone, quite honestly. I'm built different. It's the landscape that I know and I have known for pretty much a majority of my life. I've always had multiple sports. I've always participated at a high level in swimming and tennis. And when I got to Howard, I had the opportunity to play both sports all 4 years. So I was a dual sport athlete here, and it worked for me. So I've always coached both, even when I started coaching at the very, very early stages, back to high school where I taught swim lessons, or I would teach tennis lessons and help out with the pro there or the coach there and feeding for the clinics or the camps and things like that. And even at Howard, I was coaching on the side and volunteering and things like that. It's just what I know. And being able to do both is the norm for me. I know it's really weird and abnormal to everyone else, but I'm grateful that I did have a lot of time, a good 5-6 years, just to focus on swim as a D1 head coach and establish kind of the course. And I was still helping out with the tennis team, but it was on my schedule and volunteering and be it there when I can. And I was just a bonus when I did arrive or anything that I could do. But being able to chart the course through swim of what success can be like, and now being able to establish that in our tennis program has made it easier to take on both, because the administrative side is administrative side. Once you've filled out one care log, or once you've, kind of worked on one budget, what the template is, the blueprint is there. It's just the time that's associated with getting that second one done. It's nothing new that you really have to learn. Having the background of being a player and being a coach in both sports, I have an understanding and an experience level that's allowed me to speak to our athletes, in those ways that make sense to them. And the same thing with our coaching staff. I've been able to coach coaches and have a coaching tree that's gone on to coach, at high school and age group, as well as collegiate levels. So I think just being able to be as organized as I possibly can and try to communicate as best as I can to, to everyone, all the stakeholders, whether it be coaches, administration, the athletes, has made it doable. But it is crazy, especially in the month of January, February, and March. Add April to that. Those 4 months, man, they're brutal because I'm on the road every weekend, between conference championships to nationals, for both within a little less than 3 months between each other. Dual matches, morning practices. It's brutal, but then it's worth it because I'm passionate in both. I love both. I love each sport and everything that I've been able to be a witness of and have the experience through. And I love seeing those athletes, develop and gain in those spaces. So it's tough. It's definitely tough, but we're making it work somehow, some way.
And knowing the success you're building in the pool, I'm sure looking at the results, the women made it to the semifinals of the MEAC. conference tournament this year before. If you got to lose to anybody, at least you lost to the conference champion. I'll give you that. And then the men unfortunately dropped a heartbreaker to Norfolk State 4th so in that 4-5 matchup. So giving it a little bit of time, I'm sure the tennis team's going to be right up there. Now, do you have DJs going on while the tennis team's going on, or are they a little more particular about that one?
We're changing the game there too, Eric. Yeah, we do have a DJ. We don't have our own facility for tennis, which makes it a little bit more difficult. And tennis is a lot trickier because, the traditional tennis, fan or player is that's new to them. That's different. So we're trying to disrupt that. But it's really wild that the two sports that I'm, in charge of are two of the most cut sports in all of NCAA collegiate sports. Swimming number 1, tennis is number 2. So wow. When I have to think about that every day, I know that with the level of support that we have for swim, if there was a conversation, there would be so many people really standing behind us and like, no, if there's anyone that says, hey, we should consider cutting swim, there are going to be thousands and thousands of people that are going to be like, you're crazy. You can't do that. And that's what I'm trying to do for tennis as well, is really work on that sustainability, because tennis traditionally is not a sport that people are going to run to watch and support. So yes, we've incorporated a DJ. They're not on the court yet. We're trying to figure out a way to do just that. But when you come to a tennis match, we want you to enjoy that like an event as well. I mean, you look at the top tennis tournaments, the Big Four, the Grand Slams, US Open, that's an event. That's an environment. And people sat at a table and said, look, how can we take non-tennis players, which are the majority of the ticket buyers, and have them enjoy watching tennis? You have to create something. You have to do something that's a little bit different. And I think music is an easy way to do it. I think food is another way to be able to do it. And then once you get them there, you hook them in, they start to learn more about it. So you're also in the education phase of it, of how do you win a point and how do you hit a forehand and all those different things. And it takes time. It takes time to build it. And I think we're well on our way again, taking a lot of the things we learned from swim and adapting them to tennis. I've had a lot of time to think about these things, by the way. It will all come together. We've seen more people come out for tennis matches in the last 2 years than we've had probably in the history, of the program, where we've gotten up to about 100 or so, which is really good for a tennis match. And I think it will continue to build. And one day we'll get a facility that will actually have some stands, and then the goal will be to pack the stands and just as much as all the other sporting events on campus.
It's always important to teams support teams. And if you can build an environment that is welcoming for the general student or other athletes who may not know anything about your sport. We had a young man who was a diver for us several years ago, and he was actually a baseball player. He just happened to also be a surfer and a skateboarder. So he tried diving because it looked cool, and he was used to cliff jumping and swimming back to the surfboard because he was from San Diego. But as a result, the baseball team would come to our meets. Now, they would leave immediately after Dave was done with diving, but at least they started asking questions about why are they ringing the bell, or why is there a lap counter? Why is that in there? And as a former distance swimmer, I was like, because we will lose count. And I've seen sprinters lose count to 200. So, I mean, it really doesn't matter on that. But I think it's very important that you're building an environment that is welcoming to the campus community as well as the community as a whole. And I think a lot of people can take from that. The only thing I'm going to suggest is if you got a golf team, now you got to introduce like noisemakers and air horns, because I'm really tired of how quiet golf is. That is like, show me you can hit a 300-yard drive with people blaring air horns, and you get my respect. One of the things I want to touch on real quick before we get our last segment, obviously you guys are the only HBCU Division I program. I know of a few others at the Division II level that have started in recent years. What are you hearing because of the success of Howard? Are you starting to hear other HBCUs start asking questions of your administration about, should we add this sport? Should we bring this back in a lot of cases? And do you think there is a light at the end of the tunnel where we're going to start to see more HBCUs adding swimming?
I think we've taken it on as our mission to really force the conversation, to force the question. So whether they're asking the question internally, we're asking the question, and we're encouraging others, especially the alumni, to ask the question, why don't you have a swim and dive program? You're a state-funded school. There are several swimmers within your state that could be a part of your team and get, in-state tuition. So it makes a really good cost-effective sense. And you touched on earlier in our conversation about enrollment. these things make sense, and they have facilities that could, support it because they're in great condition. They may have been modernized, or they may even be a new facility altogether. We are seeing more people reaching out to us and asking, how are we able to do it? And I think that's great because I'm willing to share everything about it. Sure, does it create a rival institution for recruiting and competing? Yes, it does. But I think that's good. It's great for the sport. Just like being able to have so much noise about our program and what we do. And, going back to the on deck DJ, what do we see at women's NCAA championships this year? An on deck DJ. They've never had it in the history. They didn't say, "Hey, Howard, we got that from you," or "Thanks for thanks for that idea." But all I've heard are great things about that environment this past year and how that added to it. So other HBCUs hopefully are in those works. We think that there's some great conversations that are also the CSCAA is raising and doing feasibility studies and supporting, the research behind what it would take to bring the program back or to start a program from scratch. But at the end of the day, there has to be a plan, and what institutions are always mindful for is how much is this going to cost us? How are we able, in a struggling budget already, going to be able to add something new? So alumni and other supporters have to be questioned as well. How can you support this? What are the things that you can do? Right. So if you work for a corporation and you have in your budget, you're able to donate, let's say $5,000, you're looking to your corporation and see, do they have matching, which a lot of businesses and a lot of corporations do. So now your $5,000 donation turned into $10,000 because your corporation matched that. So it's not just looking at them and saying, asking them, are you going to bring it back? Why aren't you? It's also internally asking, what can we do to better support it? And I think there's a lot of people out there that can and should, because it's a great opportunity, for anyone who desires an HBCU education to be able to have more than enough options out there. Because one institution, Howard, we have a roster capacity. We can't exceed where we are basically now in growth. So all the emails that I get from potential recruits, once we've reached our capacity, we have to turn away. And that's sad. They should have other options, or they should be able to look at Howard and another institution like North Carolina Central and say, you know what, out of these two, this one is the best fit for me. And then they go. So we're really hopeful that A, the institutions will start asking the questions, and then B, individually and from business perspectives, people are also asking that question of how can I support it if they do. And then we'll see more and more come back.
I know one school that pre-pandemic, and I only heard about this because I was on the fringe of it. Every year we take a training trip down to Daytona Beach, and we just happened to be down there in Daytona State College, which is a 2-year institution. I was talking with their aquatics director, and I just made the comment because I want to see the growth in the NAIA, which CSCA has done a great job of helping with, and also the NJCA. Daytona State had a great program. They dropped it, and I asked, are you guys thinking about bringing that back? Are you looking at feasibility? He goes, well, we just added soccer. However, our administration has been talking with Bethune-Cookman, which is literally just down the road from them, about our facility. And they were looking at the feasibility. I think this was 2018. And then when the pandemic hit, the world shut down. And they were having some other issues, obviously, with football when Ed Reed was their head coach, but not really, and all that. So I think that it's something that's probably been tabled, but at least some questions were being asked. Some information was being gathered. And I think that's important for any institution if they're looking to add the sport, because again, we're seeing the Division I level take the biggest hit, and D2, D3, the mid-majors are starting to look at programs. I just talked with the head coach at Northern Michigan not too long ago. Lake Superior State is adding men's and women's swimming, which will be the closest team in the Upper Peninsula to Northern Michigan. And I said, great, 2 teams where it is colder than ever. We're putting swimming. Great job. But it's still growing the sport. And I think that's really important right now. So, Coach, our last segment, we call it 650s on the top. I'm going to give you 2 things, this or that. You got to pick one. There have been very few chances where I've had a lot of people to push, but here we go. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. When it comes to movies, comedies or dramas?
Comedies.
A day in the park or a day at the museum?
Day in the park.
With the Smithsonian in your backyard, you're picking the park. Okay.
Picking the
All
park.
right.
I got to go to Rock Creek Park.
There you go. Banana split or ice cream sundae?
Oh my gosh, it's a no-brainer. Banana split.
Go whale watching or swim with dolphins? Better event, the 100 butterfly or the 100 breaststroke?
100 breaststroke.
I knew when I wrote that, I hadn't fully researched. And when I went through your top times list, I'm like, oh, there's Nic's name under the 100 breast. I'm going to leave it in there. So we're going to leave that in. And finally, you are a born and raised son of the great state of North Carolina. Which do you prefer, Carolina barbecue or Carolina style hot dogs or hamburgers?
Wow. Why would you do that?
Because I love challenging people.
Man, that might have been that. This might be the hardest question of all. I mean, are we at a cookout? Can I have both?
Nope. You got to pick one.
No? Okay. It's got to be Eastern North Carolina barbecue in that circumstance. That top tier.
Ironically, the first time I ever had Carolina barbecue was in Canton, Ohio, where one of my former teammates, he had been living in Charlotte for years, and he basically got addicted to Carolina barbecue. When he moved back home, because his wife got a great job there, he started, it's the Carolina Barbecue Company. So he basically brought the recipes with him.
Really?
So he's got 2 or 3 and it's just like when, again, I grew up in Ohio, I go to Cincinnati, so we've got Skyline or Gold Star for chili, which is a condiment. It's not chili. I go to Florida and I'm in Clearwater Beach and there's a Skyline chili, and I'm like, how is this outside of Ohio? And I asked the manager, he goes, oh, our owner's from Cincinnati originally. He retired down here, but he didn't want to keep shipping cans in. So I went, that makes sense. Coach, I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to talk with us today. It's been my pleasure to hear you speak and follow Howard University. For anybody who's following on social media, they are at HU Swim and Dive at Instagram. Check them out. Keep following Coach Askew. I'm sure I'm not going to be the last podcast you're on, and hopefully we can get you back to another convention here soon. And we're going to be in Indianapolis next year, so hopefully we can get you in town if you're not too busy with tennis season.
Yeah, that was the biggest conflict this year. But Eric, thanks so much for having me, man. It's been a ton of fun. Really enjoyed being on your podcast, and shout out to you and everything you do.
Thank you, sir.